Dear all, welcome to the class of International Economics. In the last few videos, we have discussed free trade and protectionism. The protectionist trade policies were adopted by using either tariff barriers or non-tariff barriers. And also we have discussed what is tariff and what are the different kinds of tariff. Today we are dealing with non-tariff trade barriers, or we can say that it is a new protectionism. Why it is called as new protectionism? Because especially it started after the Second World War. After the Second World War, the IMF and also World Bank established, and the countries started more interaction with each other. So they also started abandoning the tariff barriers in between the countries. But instead they have used some other kind of trade barriers for the same purpose. So that all trade barriers are known as non-tariff trade barriers or new protectionism. Why it is known as new protectionism? Because the protectionism is already there, but it is not through the tariff barriers but using some other barriers called non-tariff barriers. That's why it became an era of new protectionism. So what are the non-tariff barriers? In the tariff barriers, as all of you know, there is a simple tax. Simple tax is imposed on import or export, normally on imports. So the price of the product will be going up and the demand for that products also will come down. So it will, the trade will come down ultimately. When we are talking about the non-tariff barriers, it includes quotas, voluntary export restraints, export subsidies, and variety of technical, administrative, and other restrictions, and regulations and restrictions, international cartels, dumping, then export subsidies, and there are some other restrictions also like straight trading and embargo. So these are the different kinds of trade restrictions. So the country started adopting any of these measures, especially after Second World War. So all these measures are known as non-tariff trade barriers or new protectionism. So, all these non-tariff trade barriers all are 10 times more restrictive of international trade than tariff. So 10 times more restrictive than tariff. So it gives more restriction to the international trade ultimately. So firstly, among these non-tariff barriers, the import quota is very important trade restrictions. So firstly, in this video we will be talking about the quotas. Then in the next video we will be covering the other trade barriers, other non-tariff trade barriers. What is import quota? You might have heard this word quota. What is this quota means? Quota means it's a it's a quantitative restriction on import or export. We have said the example of TV in the last class. We have said that if certain amount of tax is or tariff is imposed on TV, the price of the TV will be going up and the demand for that TV might reduced. But here there is no that kind of tariff system, but instead there is a quota, a quantitative restriction on import or export. Suppose one country deciding to make a restriction on imports of TV, up to 10,000. One country can import the TV up to 10,000 quantity, not above the 10,000. So it's a quantitative restriction on a particular commodity. So that kind of quantitative restrictions can be applied on different commodities. It is not a tax but quantitative restrictions. So how we will fix these quantitative restrictions? It can be fixed either in terms of quantity or value of product. So here we said that maximum 10,000 TVs can be imported, or else we can say that 10 lakh rupees TV can be imported. So it is in value terms. So the maximum value which can be given for the import of TV, it is 10,000 rupees. We can't give more. So it is also a restriction, but the restriction on the value of the commodity, total value of the commodity, or it can be a restriction on the quantitative restrictions. Okay. And why all these countries started imposing or adopting quota system, especially the developed countries or industrial countries. They started adopting quota system to protect their agriculture, because their imports are mainly agricultural products. So they were putting some kind of restriction or quantitative restrictions on imports to protect their own agriculture and to promote domestic production of agricultural commodities. Then what about the developing countries? Developing countries adopted this quota system to stimulate import substitution of manufactured products and for the balance of payment reasons. So there are two reasons for developing countries. Firstly, their main import is manufactured products. So they want to adopt a import substitution technique, or they want to promote the domestic production of manufactured products. That's why they adopted this quota system. And also for the balance of payment problems. We can see in the developing nations or developing countries, always they will have some kind of deficit in the balance of payment. It means that import will be always more than exports. Okay, so to correct this balance of payment problems, they can adopt this quota system. So these two were the main objective of adopting quota system in the developing nations. Now we will discuss what are the different types of import quotas. We are calling as import quota because normally the quota is applied on imports, not on exports. Okay, there are different types of import quotas. Firstly, tariff or customs quota, custom quota. It is also connected with the tariff. It means that no or less tariff for a specified amount. I mean, the tariff is applied, but a specified amount. But if the country exceeding that specified amount, high tariff can be imposed on that products. So both are applied here. Tariff is applied here and also quota is applied here. Quota, how the quota is applied? Because for specific goods or up to a specific limit, up to a specific quantitative limit, there is no tariff, or there can be a small or less tariff for that products. But above that quantitative limit, there will be high tariff. So a tariff is also applied and also quota is also applied. This kind of system is known as tariff quota or custom quota. Okay, then secondly, unilateral quota. Unilateral quota means only from one side, not from both sides, without any prior negotiation with any other countries. One country is adopting quota system Okay, without negotiation or without discussion with any other countries, if they are following the quota system and they are putting some restrictions on their imports, it is known as unilateral quota. Okay, so the unilateral quota can be in two ways. One is global quota, another one is allocated quota. Global quota means the specified amount of or specified quantity of a particular commodity is fixed. Suppose, as we said in the last case, we said that 10,000 units of TV can be imported. So that 10,000 is fixed, but there is no any particular restriction for any particular country. It is a global quota, total, from whatever be the countries, from any country up to 10,000 TVs can be imported. So this is known as global quota. So there is a quantitative restriction on the amount of commodity, but there is no restriction for to import from any particular country. That is global quota. But allocated quota means the quota is also allocated among different countries. Suppose 5,000 TVs can be imported from US, 3,000 TVs can be imported from Japan, and then 2,000 TVs can be imported from China. So if we are allotting the quota system according to different countries, it is known as allocated quota. Since these both quotas are unilateral quota, because it is negotiated with any other country, one country is deciding on their quotas. Then there are bilateral quota. Bilateral quota means two countries are making negotiations with each other and they are making discussions, they are coming to an agreement on quota system. So that kind of quota is known as bilateral quota or agreed quotas. Means two countries, we Indians and Chinese companies are making some arrangement, and we are saying that 2,000 TVs we will import, not more than that, and it is also agreed by China and they will export 2,000 TVs to us. So it is an agreed quota or bilateral quota, and we and China also fix the amount by together we have fixing the total quantity. Then there are, it is also known as agreed quotas because it is agreed by both of the nations. Then mixing quota. Mixing quota means it is an indirect way of quota. It means that suppose that we want to promote the domestic production of certain commodities, and some of the inputs might be imported from any other country. Then the government can put some restrictions. All the raw materials or all the imports cannot be imported from other country. Some domestic raw materials also should be used in the production of particular commodities. So if the government is following this strategy, it is known as mixing quota. So it is an indirect, not direct quota, it is an indirect quota. Here it is necessary to use some domestic raw materials in the production of a particular commodity. All the inputs cannot be imported. All the raw materials cannot be imported. So it is also some kind of restrictions. And the companies should use some kind of or some raw materials or inputs from domestic market also. So it is also for the same purpose, to promote the domestic production by using the domestic inputs. So this is known as mixing quota. Mixing means mixing of raw materials from abroad and also mixing of some domestic raw materials and producing the goods. Okay. Then lastly, licensing of imports. Imports can be done, but through the license. The government can issue the license for the importers, based on some regulations and also some terms. So if the government is issuing that license, that kind of products can be imported, or if there is any restriction on the quality, so the commodities which satisfy that quality can be imported. So the government can issue the licenses. So through this also the government can adopt quota system. So now we are talking about what is the difference between import quota and equivalent to import tariff. In the last class we have discussed what is tariff. So what is the difference between quota and tariff? There are mainly four differences. Firstly, we can say that the objective of both quota and tariff is same, to make some restrictions on trade or to make some restrictions on import. Okay, so if in the import quota, suppose that if the demand for we are importing some of the goods from abroad, okay, and we are restricting the limit up to 10,000 TVs, not beyond that. So what will happen? Because we are restricting the 10,000 TVs, we can't import more. Then automatically what will happen to the demand? The demand will increase, but here there are only limited products, so the demand will increase for the TVs. If the demand increases, automatically the price also will be increased. So if you are making import quota, demand for that products will be increased and price also will be increased. If the price of the product is increased, there is a high possibility that the domestic producers also produce that products. So the domestic production also will be increased, higher domestic production than tariff. So if we compare to tariff, two things happen here. Demand will increase and price will increase. So once the price is increased, automatically the domestic production also will be increased. Then what about the tariff? If it is tariff, there will be high consumption than quota, because there is no any quantitative restriction here. Only in the tariff the government is imposing some tax, but if the people are ready, they will give high prices and they will import the products, and the consumption will be increased than quota, because government can make any quantitative restrictions. So the higher consumption. Since there is a higher consumption, there is also chance of higher imports, because no need of restriction on imports. Only the taxes are there. The people are ready to pay the taxes and they will consume more, and also the imports also will be more. But it won't happen in the case of quota. Okay, so this is the first difference. So first difference, in quota, price will go up and also the domestic production will go up. But in tariff, the consumption will go up and also the imports will go up. Okay. Then secondly, import quota involves distribution of import licenses while tariff does not. In the tariff case, there is no any anything like licensing, but in import quota there will be licensing, and it will be given to the importers on specific rules and regulations. And normally these licenses, if it is not auctioned properly, if not auctioned in publicly, then there is a possibility of lobby for the licenses in rent seeking activities. So there will be some mafia and there will be some lobby to get this license for imports. And also there is a possibility of it replaces the market mechanism, and there is a possibility of corruption, because government is giving these licenses. So some of the people will be more favored to the bureaucracy, so they will be getting these licenses, and it also may lead to give some corruption or bribery to get these licenses. So this is the problem of quota. But in the tariff, there is no any kind of licenses, so there is no any possibility of corruption also. Thirdly, in the import quota, there is a certainty. Certainty means, as we said in the case, 10,000 TVs, that is fixed, that is certain. Only 10,000 TVs can be imported. But while in the tariff, we don't know how much TVs can be imported, how much TV will be demanded with this price. So there is an uncertainty. It might be lesser than this 10,000, or it might be higher than this 10,000. So the quantity is not fixed there, so there is an uncertainty. And also it is very difficult to estimate the import tariff, since the elasticity of supply and elasticity of demand is unknown. For most of the product, elasticity of supply and elasticity of demand might be unknown. So it is very difficult to estimate how much tariff should be imposed to restrict in a particular quantity. So this is the another limitation. But in import quota, there is no that kind of what we know. There is no need to check the elasticity of demand and supply, because it is certain quantity is restricted. So it is less visible, because quota is less visible, because if there is a tariff, it will be known to all people, but quota will not be known to all people. That's why it is less visible, and domestic producers prefer them over tariff, because 10,000 TVs can be imported without any problem. There is no any restriction up to that amount, but after that only there is some restrictions. That's why it is known as, so it is less visible to the people, to the domestic customers. If you are paying the tax, obviously it is more visible to us, because we will be seeing the bill, then we know that okay, this much tariff I am paying for that. But if it is quota, we won't see that. We will be getting that product. That is why it is known as, it is less visible, quota. And domestic producers prefer them over tariff. Okay, because we won't be able, we won't be happy to give the tariff to the government. So we will be happy if there is a quota, or the consumers and also producers will be happy to happy if there is a quota system. Then finally, tariff leads to tariff revenues to the government, while quota may or may not produce revenues. Tariff, through the tariff is nothing but a tax to the government. So it is a revenue to the government. But in the quota system, there won't be direct benefit or direct revenues to the government. Or they can adopt some kind of fees for license and all, but that's also not very common. That's why the government may or may not get produce the revenues through the quota system. But through the tariff, obviously the government will get the benefit and the government will get the revenues. So these are the differences between tariff and quotas. So there are, this is the first known tariff barriers, quota, which is very important and which is very commonly used trade restriction. So we will be discussing other non-tariff barriers in the next video. So thank you all. These are the references.